A 41-year-old treasure hunter dove into the murky depths off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, seeking relics from a forgotten war. Instead, he surfaced with something no one expected. Inside the rusted belly of a 1940s sunken cruise liner, in a ballroom sealed by time and pressure, he found a grand piano, corroded, bolted to the floor, and strangely intact. At first glance, it was just another relic, until he saw the sheet music. Yellowed, handwritten, and still legible. He wiped it off, laughed, and pressed a single key. When he returned to the surface and reviewed the melody, something clicked. He'd heard it before, in a documentary about disappearances no one could explain. What he discovered beneath that piano changed everything the experts thought they knew about that ship. Would you dare to play a song that history tried to drown? Let us know what you think, and subscribe for more stories like this. Matthew Calloway was not new to the sea. At 41, he had spent nearly half his life mapping wrecks and salvaging secrets from ocean graves. He wasn't wealthy, though. Far from it. Most months, his diving expeditions barely covered fuel, food, and gear. But he was patient, disciplined, and when luck struck, it struck like lightning. He lived out of a small fishing boat retrofitted for long-range diving, moored most of the year at a ramshackle marina in Mount Pleasant, just east of Charleston. Locals knew him, the quiet guy with the sun-beaten face and notebook always filled with old maps and stranger theories. That morning began like any other. Cool salt air, still waters, the smell of outboard fuel. Matthew sipped weak black coffee from a dented thermos, checked his gauges, and reviewed his coordinates for the 5th time. The target was a footnote in a declassified maritime document. A cruise liner sunk in 1941, presumed torpedoed, with only vague logs hinting at its purpose. Most divers avoided it. The depth wasn't particularly dangerous, but the wreck had a reputation. Silt clouds that never cleared, metal that corroded faster than it should, equipment failures. Bad luck. Stories whispered at marina bars said it was cursed. Matthew didn't believe in curses, but he believed in patterns, and something about this wreck didn't add up. The sonar pinged just after 10:43 a.m., a wide oblong shape, about 400 feet long, mostly intact, partially buried in sediment. He noted the coordinates, suited up, and descended. The water was colder than usual, and visibility dropped the deeper he went. But around 170 feet, the hull came into view, a ghostly silhouette, rusted orange and green with algae, listing slightly to starboard. He moved carefully, touching nothing, letting the beam of his dive light cut through the gloom. Most of the upper decks had collapsed inward over the years, but one section stood strangely preserved, a rounded structure with ornate portholes and a carved metal door, partially ajar. The ballroom. He slipped through the doorway and hovered inside, stunned by what he saw. The ceiling had caved in, but the walls still bore remnants of decorative art, torn velvet panels, shattered sconces, and there, bolted to the floor beneath a halo of debris, a grand piano. Its surface was mottled with rust, keys long yellowed, some broken or missing. Yet something about it remained whole. Matthew floated closer. There was no reason for a piano to be here. No cruise liner from that era, not one used for its reported purpose, would waste deck space on such extravagance. He reached out, brushing away layers of silt. That's when he saw it. A sheet of music, folded and wedged between the keys. It was impossible. Paper this old, underwater for over 80 years, shouldn't even exist, let alone remain legible. But this sheet had survived. The ink, though faded, was clear enough to read. The notes were handwritten. Sharp, clean, and oddly elegant. He couldn't help it. With a dry chuckle that escaped through his mouthpiece, he pressed one of the few intact keys. A dull, muted sound reverberated through the hull. Harmless, silly, or so it seemed. He tucked the sheet into his collection pouch, took photos of the piano from every angle, then turned to leave. But before he exited the ballroom, something odd happened. His dive light flickered, not once but twice, in rapid succession. He checked the connection. Batteries were new, no water had leaked in. Strange, but not impossible. Back on the boat, he dried off, uploaded the photos, and hung the sheet music to dry in the sun. It wasn't until that evening, eating cold canned beans on deck, that he remembered where he had heard that melody before. He was half watching a documentary on his tablet, one he had downloaded weeks ago for the long solo nights. It was about wartime disappearances, ships that vanished, convoys that were never accounted for, rumors of secret deals gone sideways. In the background, barely noticeable, was a melody, slow, haunting, melancholic, the same melody he had just pulled from the ocean floor. He paused the video, rewound, played it again. Same notes, same pattern. He compared it to the sheet drying on the line. There was no mistaking it. This was not coincidence. He barely slept that night. Waves rocked the boat gently, but his mind was storming. How could a melody, trapped underwater for decades, appear in a modern documentary? The next morning, he made a decision. He had to go back, not for treasure, not for profit, but for truth. He dove again, this time with a plan. He would examine the piano more carefully, look beneath and around it, photograph everything. He marked the floor with chalk lines, traced the pattern of bolts securing the instrument, and began scraping away the sediment at its base. That's when he felt it, a hollow vibration, like metal shifting against metal. The piano was bolted not just to the floor but to something underneath. He spent the next 3 hours working with underwater tools, gently loosening the bolts, taking care not to damage what might lie beneath. Finally, with a soft creak and a puff of sediment, the piano lifted an inch, and that's all it needed. Beneath it lay a rusted compartment, sealed with a warped metal hatch. Inside, waterlogged documents, sealed in metal tubes, still intact. Matthew didn't open them underwater. Instead, he secured the tubes, marked the site, and surfaced. Back on deck, he dried the tubes, carefully cut one open, and unrolled what appeared to be a typed manifest. The paper was military issue. The header read, "Confidential, Transport 7, 1941. The names listed below were all unfamiliar, but a few had accompanying designations. Lieutenant CMDR, Severe's Contractor, Specker's Logistics. One name had been redacted with ink. Another was circled in pencil with a note. Arranged diversion protocol. If compromised, sink. He didn't know what to make of it. He called a friend, Rena, a maritime historian with ties to the Charleston Maritime Archives. She agreed to meet the next morning. When she saw the sheet music, her face went pale. That's not just music, she said. That was part of a symphony performed only once, at a private ceremony during World War II. The sheet was presumed lost in a fire. Where did you find this? In the ballroom of the wreck. She stared at him. That wreck, wasn't it the Delfina? He nodded. The Delfina wasn't a cruise ship, she said. Not really. It was a diplomatic vessel, disguised. There were rumors it was used for secret meetings, black market exchanges, weapons deals. Some say it was intentionally sunk to erase evidence. Matthew's stomach turned. Everything he thought he knew about that dive had changed in an instant, but something else lingered in his mind, something far less rational. He hadn't just found the music, he'd played a note, one key, and now, strange things had started happening. Lights flickering, odd sounds at night. His GPS shorted twice. He laughed it off, but deep down something unnerved him. That melody, he could still hear it. Sometimes when the wind blew across the deck just right, it almost sounded like it was being played again. He hadn't told Rena that part yet. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe it was the start of something much bigger. What do you think really happened aboard the Delfina? Was it a cover-up, a botched operation, or something darker? We want to hear what you think. Write in the comments where you're watching from and what you believe that music was truly hiding. If you're enjoying the story, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more mysterious discoveries, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the next dive, it reveals far more than just old paper and broken ivory. Matthew barely slept again that night. His mind played the melody in loops, each note a thread tugging at a deeper unease. At first he told himself it was stress, maybe even guilt. After all, he'd tampered with a wreck that others had left alone for decades, one with a shadowy past and ties to wartime secrecy. But then something else happened. At 3:12 a.m., his radio turned on by itself. Not static, not interference, music, low, tinny, as if from underwater speakers. The same melody. He sat upright, staring at the receiver. The dial hadn't moved, no frequency was selected, and then, just as abruptly, it stopped. He didn't tell Rena, not yet. At daybreak, they returned to the site. She insisted on seeing the wreck herself. Matthew prepped 2 sets of gear, fitted her with backup comms, and reviewed safety protocols. She was a good diver, if a bit rusty, but she understood the stakes now. Their descent was slow and silent. At 165 feet, the Delfina came into view again, ghostly, stoic. Its presence now felt heavier, almost as if the water pressed harder the closer they got. Inside the ballroom, Rena floated speechless. Her eyes scanned the faded grandeur, the twisted metal light fixtures, the strange dignity with which the piano remained fixed in place despite decades of corrosion and collapse. She moved carefully, taking notes, voice recording her impressions. Matthew guided her to the hatch where he had found the documents. He had sealed it again for safety, but now he opened it once more. Together, they retrieved 2 more metal tubes. Back aboard the boat, they dried them under warm lamps and set to work. The first tube contained another manifest, this one encoded in a cipher neither could recognize. The second was a stack of partially burned correspondence between naval officers and 2 unnamed intermediaries. The letters referenced unregistered cargo, compromised agents, and the necessity of silence. One line stood out: the music must never surface. If compromised, initiate symphony lock. Rena whispered the words aloud, confused. Symphony lock? Matthew said nothing. He knew now that the music wasn't incidental. It wasn't just a relic or a haunting coincidence. It was a message, a key, and maybe he'd already turned it. He showed Rena the documentary clip. As the melody played, she froze. I've heard this before, in Vienna, during a lecture on unclaimed wartime archives. A German historian played this piece. He said it was recovered from an abandoned manor used during the Nuremberg trials. That's not possible, Matthew said, but it is, and he had no idea where it originated. Said the original composer was unknown. Then why is it here? Matthew asked. Why underwater? Why hidden in a piano bolted to the floor? Rena looked at him. Because it was meant to stay buried. Maybe the music itself was a code. They needed help. Matthew contacted a contact in Virginia, a former Navy linguistics officer turned cryptanalyst named Jonas Meeks. He was reluctant, skeptical at first, but once he heard the music and saw the phrase symphony lock, he agreed to come down immediately. Jonas arrived 36 hours later with 2 briefcases, a portable signal reader, and a cautious attitude. He barely greeted them before scanning the documents. This isn't just encryption, he said after several hours. This is layered. The phrase symphony lock isn't a metaphor, it's literal. The sequence of notes corresponds to an older military frequency protocol, Cold War era. If you played those notes as tonal inputs on a frequency range, it could unlock a channel or initiate something. Like what? Matthew asked. A message, or a signal, or a trap, Rena added. Jonas nodded slowly. They decided to test it. Using tone generators, Jonas input the musical sequence into a modified radio scanner, matching the rhythm and pitch of the melody exactly. At first, nothing happened. Then, a blip, followed by a low pulsing signal, one that rose and fell in timed intervals. I've only seen this pattern once, Jonas said. In the Balkans, 1997. A ghost signal. Military origins. It shut down the moment we triangulated it. But this one's still live, Matthew said. For now, Jonas whispered. It was no longer just a piano, a ship, or a melody. Something, someone, didn't want this unearthed. 2 nights later, Matthew's boat was broken into. Nothing was taken, but the inside was ransacked. Tubes opened, documents scattered. The original sheet music was gone. There were no fingerprints, no forced entry. But on the deck, carved into the varnish near the helm, were 2 letters. DL, the ship's initials. Matthew didn't sleep at all that night. He sat on the deck, shotgun across his lap, watching the water. In the morning, they returned to the Delfina. This time, with a waterproof case and full video recording equipment. They would recover everything they could and turn it over to authorities, after documenting it thoroughly. Back in the ballroom, something had changed. The piano had moved, just slightly, tilted as if repositioned, but it was bolted. Matthew knew that. He had struggled with every single screw to lift it, yet now it sat at a new angle, facing the doorway. Rena backed away. This isn't normal. They found a 3rd compartment hidden under a loose tile behind the piano. Inside, photographs, black and white, water-stained but intact. Men in uniform, officers, and civilians, shaking hands, passing briefcases, standing in front of the Delfina's distinctive ballroom windows. One photo had a name scrawled on the back: Brigadier S. Rommel, SC Deal, June 1941. Rena's breath caught. Rommel? That can't be. He was reported dead 2 months before this date. Matthew stared at the photo. Then either the date is wrong, or the history is. Jonas, examining another photo, spoke softly. This is what I feared. This isn't a story about music. This is about people who didn't want to be remembered. And now they were. Back on the surface, the signal returned but stronger. Jonas recorded it, converted it to waveform, and overlaid it with the original sheet music. It matched, beat for beat. This melody, Jonas said, was more than a code. It was a map. He began cross-referencing the musical sequence with naval charts, sonar maps, and old shipping routes. Hours passed. Then, just before midnight, he looked up, pale. It's pointing somewhere. To what? He didn't answer. He just input the coordinates. An isolated patch of sea, 47 miles southeast of their current location. A known naval dumping zone during the final year of World War II. No civilian vessels permitted. Off limits. But now, with this signal, there was a reason to go. The melody, the one Matthew had played by instinct, was unlocking more than just memory. It was a breadcrumb trail, and someone, somewhere, was watching them follow it. Would you keep digging, knowing every note you play might open another door best left closed? The deeper they go, the more the Delfina gives up, and the less safe any of them become. Subscribe to stay with us. By dawn, the sea was calm, unnaturally so. The storm from the day before had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a stillness that felt staged. The water reflected the sky like glass, blue, endless, deceptive. Jonas had plotted the exact coordinates, 47 miles southeast, a point in the Atlantic designated no transit. Officially, it was listed as unstable due to subsurface debris and environmental risk. Unofficially, no one really knew what was down there. It didn't appear on modern shipping maps. Only military-grade sonar scans revealed the jagged anomalies beneath. They set off at first light. Matthew steered, Rena organized the equipment, and Jonas monitored the signal. The further they traveled, the stronger it grew. Not louder, clearer, more structured. What had been static pulses now formed rhythms, repetitions, crescendos. It was music, but not as anyone knew it. This isn't a broadcast, Jonas said. It's a countdown. Matthew didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the horizon. At 9:47 a.m., they reached the zone. From the surface, it looked no different than any other patch of ocean. But when Jonas dropped a hydrophone, the recordings came back. Wrong. Echoes with no origin. Pulses out of sync with their own instruments. Metallic creaks from impossible depths. They geared up again. Matthew dove first, followed by Rena. Jonas stayed aboard, coordinating from the deck. At 200 feet, the water changed. It wasn't temperature or pressure. It was color, a faint tint like greenish smoke diffusing in salt water. The deeper they went, the thicker it became. Visibility dropped, current slowed, and then there it was. A second shipwreck, but this one was no cruise liner. It was angular, armored, a military vessel unmistakably. Rusted cannons lay half buried in sand. A shattered conning tower tilted toward the abyss. Debris fields scattered outward in geometric patterns. And at the center, a large container, black, rectangular, locked in steel braces the size of a minivan. Rena floated still. She gestured with her hand lamp. Carved into the container's side were the initials, SR-7B, the same code from the documents found beneath the piano. Matthew examined the brace. It had no keyhole, just 5 round protrusions, like finger slots. Above it, etched crudely into the metal, a musical staff, 5 lines. One note highlighted in red, a D. He didn't hesitate. He pressed it on his dive console. A tone echoed in the water, subaudible, felt more than heard, and then the brace retracted. The container creaked open. Inside were cylinders, 6 of them, labeled in German, Russian, English. Each bore a date, ranging from 1939 to 1944, and a symbol Matthew didn't recognize, a broken treble clef with an eye in the center. One was cracked open and empty. Suddenly Rena clutched her comm. Her voice trembled through static. "Matt, something's moving below us." He looked down. Sand was rising. Not in a current, in a spiral. Something was stirring beneath the wreck. They surfaced in record time, bursting onto the deck, gasping. Jonas met them, pale. "The signal, it changed. As soon as you opened it. It's broadcasting in every direction now." "To where?" He didn't answer. They returned to port under overcast skies. The water had grown darker behind them. Not stormy, but dense, as if the sea itself disapproved. Matthew uploaded the dive footage to a secure drive. Then they reviewed everything. The container, the notes, the sheet music, the symbols. Rena made the connection first. "These weren't weapons," she whispered. "They were compositions, or more specifically, instructions." "For what?" "Experiments, psychological conditioning, propaganda, but deeper. These symphonies weren't written for orchestras. They were written for activation." Jonas leaned back, stunned. "Sound-based triggers. That's what symphony lock really means." These weren't just codes. They were behavioral keys. Matthew's mind reeled. He thought of the note he'd played. What had he awakened? Over the next week, strange reports surfaced across the East Coast. Coastal monitoring buoys malfunctioning. Whale pods exhibiting erratic behavior. Submariners reporting music-like sonar pings at irregular depths. One diver in North Carolina claimed to have heard a cello playing beneath the waterline, miles from shore. Matthew didn't speak to the press, but someone else did. An anonymous report leaked to a fringe naval history site claimed that the Delfina was part of a program called Project Mariner's Choir, a joint military operation between Allied and Axis defectors. Its aim, to develop sound-based technology for interrogation, misinformation, and if rumors were true, influence on a mass scale. The ship was scuttled not due to attack, but to prevent exposure. Everything Matthew found was never meant to resurface. Now it had. They met one last time, Rena, Jonas, and Matthew, in a secure lab outside Charleston. The cylinders were gone, taken by men in unmarked vehicles 2 days after the dive. No explanation, no return address, just gone. But the music remained. They had recreated it. Digital simulations, tonal reconstructions, carefully isolated. When they played it at low frequency for 30 seconds, nearby electronics glitched. When played for 2 minutes, Jonas reported headaches, minor hallucinations, and a loss of short-term memory. They stopped after that. Now, the question wasn't what they found, but what was missing. Because one cylinder had been empty, and they had no idea where it had gone. Rena floated a theory. Maybe the first melody, the one in the piano, had already been played once. Maybe that cylinder had already been deployed, somewhere, somehow, embedded in a film, a broadcast, a wartime radio program, echoing across decades. It explained the documentary, the melody in Vienna, the repeating patterns in sonar arrays. Whatever it was, it had already begun. Matthew sat alone that night, watching the water from the same deck where it all started. He still heard the melody, but now it was changing. New notes, different keys, as if something, or someone, was replying. Have you ever heard music in a place where it didn't belong? Could it be your memory? Or is something reaching out? Let us know what you think this melody really is. A secret code? A lost message? Or something even more dangerous? Drop your theories in the comments. And don't forget to like this video if you're still listening. Subscribe for more stories like this. And hit the bell so you'll be the first to know when the final piece of the puzzle surfaces. 3 months passed. The story of the Delfina, the sunken piano, and the mysterious melody had spread, but not through official channels. No news broadcasts, no press conferences, just fragments online, leaked documents, blurry screenshots, strange audio files circulating forums late at night, each with its own variation of the tune, slightly off-key, slightly wrong. Matthew had disappeared from public view. So had Jonas. Rena, last anyone heard, had accepted a research fellowship overseas, though no university ever confirmed it. But one day, a sealed envelope arrived at the Charleston Maritime Archive. No return address, no stamps. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note. There's another one. Beneath the ice. Do not play it. The footage on the drive showed a figure, in full dive gear, descending through an icy cavern. The coordinates pinged somewhere near Greenland. The audio feed, That same melody. Slower this time, but unmistakably alive. It confirmed what Rena had suspected. This wasn't one ship, one melody, one experiment. It was a system. A network of compositions scattered across oceans, hidden within wrecks, designed to stay buried until the right tones unlocked them. Each one a piece of a puzzle orchestrated by people long dead, or perhaps never fully alive. And they had triggered the first movement. Matthew re-emerged in Norway, alone, thin, his eyes hollow. A journalist caught up with him outside a harbor tavern, but he refused to speak. All he said before walking into the mist was, "The sea sings back, and it's learning the words." No one saw him after that. The boat was found adrift weeks later, with only a tape recorder still running. The melody played over and over, but it wasn't the same. It had grown, evolved. New instruments, new patterns. Experts analyzed the frequencies and found embedded layers. Data signals, numerical sequences, even biometric identifiers woven into the tones. Someone, or something, had been listening. One musicologist described it best. "It's not a song, it's a summoning." But what was it calling? Back in Charleston, the piano was gone. The wreck of the Delfina collapsed after an unexplained seabed tremor. The location is now cordoned off by an international maritime protection order, citing hazardous structural risk. But those who've gone close enough say you can still hear something beneath the waves, faint notes, as if someone far below is playing. The melody changes depending on the hour, and one phrase keeps returning. The original sequence Matthew found, the one he played by instinct, the one that should never have been heard, and now it can't be unheard. You see, this wasn't just a discovery. It was a broadcast, a signal to others, to those who remember the deals struck in secret, the weapons not made of steel or fire, but of vibration, rhythm, and resonance. The symphonies were never just music. They were instructions, blueprints for cognitive manipulation, for mass forgetting, for rewiring truth. And now that they've been heard again, the music is waking up. Each person who hears it hums it once, then forgets where they learned it. Each device that plays it reboots twice, then malfunctions days later. Each coastal microphone that records it eventually goes silent. What lies beneath the sea is not gone. It's rehearsing. The next performance has not been scheduled, but the orchestra is assembling. And you've already heard the first note. So now we ask you, do you believe the music was composed or conjured? Do you think this melody is a message or a warning? Was it meant for us or for something we've yet to meet? We want to know what you think. Leave your theory in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of what resurfaces next, because there is more, then do this right now. Like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next time the sea sings, you'll want to be listening before it starts singing back.